Part 109. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1097. What is coming will always come, and you can't avoid it even if you want to. The next morning, Subai appeared at the train station holding the little guy. The train station was bustling with people. It was approaching the holidays, so the passenger flow here was naturally extremely high. Subai didn't know why the broadcast always chose the train station as the starting point. The form was actually just a skin and had no specific effect, but at least it could show a mentality, that is, the mentality of the rule maker. In Subai's view, it might be more satisfying to have a group of big guys waiting for the train with the bustling ordinary people. Of course, Su Yuhang probably didn't have this kind of bad taste, and he didn't have it at this time. In that idle mind, this is just a tradition that the current broadcast consciousness is too lazy to change. According to the fat man's complaint, the train station can be turned into a public toilet. The big guys line up and jump into the pit one by one. Jump in and enter that world. If someone is unlucky and jumps into the wrong pit, he will be splashed with shit. More fun. Big bosses from the entire Dongfang circle have already arrived, and the number of people is much larger than Subai expected. It seems that the promotion during the broadcast period has been quite effective. There are already nearly 70 big bosses in Dongfang. Of course, most of them are substandard products. Subai felt that he could beat them before he was enlightened. But necessary cannon fodder is still needed. The 70 people were not very conspicuous among the thousands of people, and the big guys were dressed differently, but it could be seen in general. Facing the unknown world they were about to go to, everyone was still a little uneasy. Perhaps, Subai should be a breath of fresh air in the entire painting style, bringing his family with him, his son, and 2 pet cats. I found a coffee shop and sat down. The little guy was very good in Subai's arms. Jixiang and Ruyi were also crawling at Subai's feet. The 2 cold cats also knew how to advance and retreat at this time. The fat man went to buy an ice cream for the little guy, and then sat down next to Subai. The monk and the Buddha did not go to Laofang's house, so the reunion at the old place that everyone had promised could only be left as a regret. A quarter of an hour later, the monk and Lord Buddha also walked into the train station. It could be seen that they were in a hurry. In fact, there is not much difference between the station and the station. Even if you don't come to the station, the broadcaster will probably drive the bus directly in front of you. If you insist on not getting on the bus, then according to the broadcast rules, the people on the bus will get off first and the idiots who don't get on the bus will die before leaving. Therefore, there is basically no delay in this situation. Amitabha. The monk walked up to Subai, bent down, and gave the little guy a string of Buddhist beads on his wrist as a toy. Then he looked at Subai. If I had known, the poor monk would have come earlier. Buddha looked more free and easy, sitting cross-legged directly on the tiles. The condemned prisoners were allowed to have a meal before going to the execution ground, but the 4 of them were not able to have a formal gathering before leaving. This was not hypocritical, but they just felt that this was a bit unsightly. It will be the same when we get there, Subai Kai explained. Everyone waited quietly at this location. It was now 7:30, and the train would not leave for half an hour. Subai saw Boss Liang sitting opposite, with Xie Zhen beside him. He also saw Emma. This woman was probably too lazy to go back to the west, and was going directly to the east to get on the bus. It was the same thing anyway. Subai also saw a lot of familiar faces, basically some of the people he had met when he was a senior. Some of them had also achieved enlightenment, but for more people, the grass on their graves was almost 3 feet high, and the waves were washing away the sand. Under this situation, most people have been reduced to stepping stones and dead bones in the goo cultivation system previously broadcast. Everyone was very quiet, and this quietness even affected the entire train station. 70 bosses and almost 70 suppressed emotions are enough to form an invisible atmosphere that affects the entire station. Some people suddenly dare not speak. Even if they say something to the people passing by, they lower their voices subconsciously. They don't know the reason for this, but this kind of fear is real. It's like the leaders are holding a meeting above to talk things over, but no one below dares to make a loud noise. Many classic war movies basically have a process, that is, everyone receives training together before going to the battlefield, and then is sent to the battlefield meat grinder. During this process, the protagonist often has his own mental journey. Just like the big guys staying in the train station now. Maybe, after I get on the train and go to that world, all distracting thoughts will be eliminated instantly. Monk, how are you cleaning up? The fat man asked the monk. It's okay, the monk replied. Don't be okay, the fat man was a little anxious. I have to think about whose thigh I will hug now. After the fat man became enlightened, he basically stopped playing the game. He went everywhere to care for the fallen women and spread the true feelings of the world. He was not in a hurry to work hard to improve his cultivation. At this time, he was a bit like a scumbag before the exam, and he was concerned about the real results of his gay friends. The monk smiled, looked at Subai and said, Amitba, which leg is thicker than the prince's? Being with a king is like being with a tiger. The fat man suddenly said something very philosophical. It's either life or death, it doesn't matter. Buddha seemed free and easy. In the past, Buddha's temperament was as sharp as a sword that had just been polished. But now, he seems very mediocre, but underneath this mediocrity lies a hidden meaning. Thunderous weather. Let's go find hills when the time comes, Subai suggested. Except for the first time, he had never been drawn into the story world by the broadcast several times, so he was not familiar with the results and layout of Fatty's joint training, but in fact this has little impact. According to what Boss Liang said before, people with strong individual strength are completely used as sharp knives. There is no need to cooperate with others, and others are not qualified to cooperate with you. Yeah, the fat man nodded, and then went to buy some snacks and ate them bit by bit, as if he could relieve some stress in this way. The train began to whistle, deafeningly loud, but ordinary people here could not hear it. Ready to get in the car. Boss Liang stood up and roared at this time, quite like a big brother taking the lead, but to be honest, people who don't know him can say that people who know him really don't have much confidence in him. Everyone started to line up to check in. Subai walked at the back holding the little guy. Jixiang and Ruyi followed Subai. This combination was very unusual and attracted the attention of some unfamiliar bosses. In this world, there are privileges everywhere. Subai's behavior is considered privileged. Not only does he bring his son, he also brings his pets. But no one is angry. After all, we are not going abroad for inspection at public expense. They are taking the whole family to die together. If you are still jealous, you are really out of your mind. Subai also saw Yi Moliai and Liao Qiu. They had entered the story world together before, but they lost contact later. Now everyone was queuing up to go through the security check. Although they didn't look panicky, they couldn't be happy either. Scan the QR code with your mobile phone to pass the level directly. One enters and the other disappears. When Subai entered, the surrounding environment changed directly, and the cold train platform appeared again. The fat man came close to Subai and sighed. I remember that Subai and I had boarded the train here. After several years of rotation, it was their turn to board the train. Once upon a time, a large number of senior people died here because one of them foolishly said that Subai wanted to eat alone inside and broke the window. The green train was parked there, and the doors had been opened. Some people had already entered, while others were temporarily staying on the platform. They were still unwilling to go in until the whistle sounded again. Breathing just a few more moments of free air is a wonderful thing. Fat man Subai shouted. What? The fat man shook out the ashes from his cigarette. He hadn't gone in yet. Stand still. What's wrong? I'll buy you some oranges, Subai said. Oranges, where are they? The fat man suffered the loss of culture and really looked around to see where there was a fruit stall. Hey, my dear, how awesome is the stall owner who can set up a fruit stall here? Subai patted the fat man on the shoulder. I lied to you, go in. Hey, you're confused, Fatty muttered, dropped the cigarette butt, and walked into the train with Subai. The green leather train had simple hard seats. Subai put the little guy next to him, with Ji Xiang and Ruyi sitting opposite him, and Buddha, the monk and the fat man sitting on the other side. The carriage was very quiet, almost suffocating. Fortunately, this wait did not last long. The train whistle sounded and the car body started to move at the same time. The sound of the whistle is a bit dull, but it has a special rhythm, like a death knell, and for whom does the death knell toll? Damn, this broadcast is too clumsy, and they don't even bring some food and drink, the fat man complained. Are you hungry? The monk smiled. No, isn't this boring? I'm so busy talking. The more critical the moment came, the fat man's mood became more and more confused. No one knew how the Qin army in that world would greet them, and there was also the factor of broadcasting an early departure. All in all, the situation shouldn't be too good. When Subai heard this, he said directly, there is a catering workshop here, you can go there and have a look. Subai had been inside a train before, so he was familiar with the situation here. At the same time, he asked the fat man, bring some milk for Xiaoxian. Okay. The fat man stood up, but he hadn't left yet. A sharp shouting sound came directly. Peanut melon seeds, mineral water, beer, drinks, and instant noodles. A shelf cart filled with drinks and snacks automatically came slowly from the entrance of this carriage. Behind him. There was no push. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1099. The train stopped again not long after it started. When it arrived at a new train station, the carriage door opened automatically and people outside began to get on the train. This was the western platform. Su Hills was wearing a white suit and looked full of aristocratic temperament. Of course, he was an aristocrat himself, but he was indeed a bit of a coward today. Those who didn't know thought he was going to attend a wedding today. Let's all take this carriage. Hills shouted to the man behind him. This group of people are all from the Hills team, or the hilltop called Hills. Fat Buddha monk and the others are also here. There are not many train carriages, but there are fewer passengers, so you can freely choose your seats. Crowded. There are 5 hills in total, and there is still room for 1 carriage on each hilltop. Hills didn't regard himself as an outsider. He just squeezed in and sat next to Subai. At the same time, he smiled and said, I heard that you had a fight with that Mr. Liang yesterday. The circle is so big, and the top circle is even smaller, so nothing can be hidden. Subai nodded. Is there any difference? Hills asked. It's not like life or death. Hills suddenly said, I understand. The train stopped a few more times to pick up some listeners from other continents. Of course, these listeners had fewer trees than those from the east and the west. By the end, all the listeners should have been picked up, and the train started to accelerate. This also means that no one is ignorant of not getting on the train. Although the radio is a bit slow in the hands of Su Yuhang, it has generally maintained its final dignity. In the carriage, almost everyone was silent. Some of them looked out the window, while others closed their eyes and concentrated. Everyone was realizing this speed. This speed exceeds the speed of light and reaches another level, so it can travel between world planes. Of course, the current understanding is nothing more than improvising, but most people are indeed improvising. The fat man went to the dining workshop and brought many lunch boxes, but even he had no appetite. A train carries a marching legion. However, this legion has no faith and no unified organization. Although the morale of the army is not scattered, it is difficult to gather much cohesion. But most people still have the same goal, which is to survive. The speed of the train suddenly slowed down, as if it had entered some kind of sticky area, and streaks of colorful blue light began to sweep around continuously. Meanwhile, everyone on the train felt a sense of discomfort and rejection. They do not belong to the world they are about to go to, so as they get closer to that world, they clearly feel the malice coming from that world. This feeling is a bit like the fact that if species with different climate conditions on the Earth are transplanted, most of them will die miserably. However, at this moment, a sign appeared in front of everyone. This was already arranged by the broadcaster. "Is this the fate card?" the fat man muttered. "Taking this life card is tantamount to voluntarily handing over your life and death to the radio, but at the same time, you can also get a glimmer of protection from higher beings from the radio, and the world will no longer reject you. Just as plants are difficult to transplant across climates, humans are more adaptable." Most people reached out and held the life cards without any hesitation. The next moment, the life cards disappeared, and the uncomfortable and repulsive feeling on their bodies also dissipated. In fact, the broadcaster can complete this operation on the listener in the original world. Of course, there is no problem in completing it at this time. This may also be a reminder. Remind everyone here again that your life will not matter if you die. Another world, but still within my control. Hills also held the life card, and then looked at Sudbai. The life card in front of Sudbai was still flashing, but Sudbai still didn't reach out. "Are you confident?" Hills asked. Sudbai shook his head, then stretched out his hand to hold the life card in front of him. At the same time, the life card changed and turned red. This change was somewhat different from other people's. In fact, Sudbai can try to resist and not pick up this brand, but the risk is too great. Even if Sudbai can escape the control of the broadcast to a certain extent, can he resist the new world that is about to pass? Although his terrible rejection reaction was still unknown, secondly, the little guy and Ji Xiangruyi were brought on the train by him, which meant that he was dragging the three of them alone. Therefore, Sudbai felt that there was no need to tie the three of them to him. "Let's try to fight against that rejection together." Hills looked a little disappointed. He originally thought that Sudbai would bear it, but Sudbai didn't do that. Suddenly, he felt that he missed the Su he first met in the proving ground. "Su, I always feel that it is too calm and not exciting enough." Everyone, including Sudbai, was exposed to the fate card. In this way, broadcast reaffirmed his control over the team. So, next. This is the real highlight. Long doesn't want to insert anything in the middle of the book, but please forgive me, because the unscrupulous thief publisher actually deliberately deleted Long's single chapter and the author's chapter epilogue, infringing on your interests and even sealing your mouth. Chuck Ndizia Long's new book He Came From Hell has been released. Please come to starting point to support. The train began to tremble, and it felt as if you were sitting in a spaceship that was passing through the Earth's atmosphere. Of course, this metaphor is indeed a little too small compared to the current situation. The travel between world planes is far larger than the atmosphere of the Earth, and it cannot even be compared specifically. The food truck that used to sell Gwich'er mineral water appeared again, but this time instead of food and water on the shelves, there was a local map book. Hills also took a copy and glanced at it. It felt a bit like the dungeon strategy map he used to play online games. What the area is called and what attributes and characteristics it has are all marked on the map in great detail. Of course, as for the specific countries, ethnic groups, and forces, there is of course no such miscellaneous stuff, because it means nothing to these big guys. The original natives of this world have been completely destroyed by previous generations of listeners. Their enemy is very simple and unique, and that is the Qin army. At most, sometimes you may have to make use of special terrain, such as the Sea of Death, the Cursed Valley, etc. I don't know if it's because of laziness in broadcasting or to clearly define the theme. In short, the names of these places are really the same as those in online games. Almost. The train finally began to calm down after a series of tremors, but everyone's hearts began to hang. Mountains. Lake. Ocean. Plain. Hills. Specific images of the earth began to appear in the car window. Finally, a black sea appeared outside the car window. The Sea of Death, Fatty muttered, the train was preparing to stop here. It's not like. The monk frowned slightly. Apparently, he detected a special smell. Hills initially thought this was the Sea of Death marked on the map, but he soon realized it and shouted before the train had stopped and he had no time to open the door. Prepare to fight. The formation masters prepare in advance. The melee fighters follow me to the front line. Not only this carriage, but also shouts came from several other carriages. Obviously, there are still careful people who can find the problem immediately. Subai sat there without moving, but subconsciously took out a cigarette and lit it. This was not to show off, but because he might not even have the time to smoke a cigarette later. He lowered his head and looked at the little guy who was still lying by the window looking at the scene outside. Subai reached out and patted the little guy on the head. Somewhat helpless. There is also some melancholy. Unexpectedly, I really couldn't rest for a moment. Su Fu is very old, but he can still wield a knife. The original clone of Su Fu could react like that in the story world, let alone his true self. Take good care of him, Subai told the two black cats. In fact, there is no need to say this. With Ji Xiangruyi's character, if the little guy will be harmed, the prerequisite must be that Ji Xiangruyi has died in the battle, but at this time, there is only this kind of homely chatter that can be said. Just like Cao cared about the life problems of his wives and concubines before he died, no matter how awesome a person is, he can't think about how to maintain his B level all day long when eating and going to the toilet. In another carriage, Boss Liang sighed helplessly. Xie put his hand on Boss Liang's shoulder. It may be too late to make the tombstone, Boss Liang said sadly. He had found someone to design the style of the tombstone before he came, but he didn't expect that he wouldn't have a moment to spare. It's okay, I don't care about those things, Xie comforted. Several listeners nearby heard this conversation and felt chills in their hearts. Click, 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 click. The Dead Sea below the train began to move neatly. Soon. He lifted up the changa and pointed it into the air. The war horses raised their hooves and neighed. The crossbow arrows were strung one after another, the light was shining coldly. The fighting spirit is gathered together, ready to explode. Where is the Dead Sea? This is an endless array of soldiers wearing black armor in a neat formation. This is a sea of people. But it is also considered the Dead Sea. Later. This place will surely become the most bloody and terrifying Shura battlefield, and countless lives, regardless of high or low, will wither here. Raise the flag. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. The war drums are beating. Black battle flags with the word Qin spread out from the array. Countless soldiers below clashed their weapons neatly on the ground. For a time. Landslides and landslides. The new book He Came from Hell has been released on Kidian. Due to the delay in the express delivery of the contract, the status of the new book was not changed to the contracted status during the day yesterday, so rewards could not be given. Now the status has changed to the contracted status, and rewards can be given. In fact, he is a little embarrassed to speak up. Asking readers for money directly would really damage his image, but Long said that he does not regard himself as a writer or scholar, but a storyteller. When a story is about to come to an end, starting a new one is equivalent to a storyteller moving to a new venue. he has to ask old customers and listeners to come and support him and send some flower baskets and banners. The worst is to throw some coins on the stage during the first performance. Broken silver. The performance of new books determines whether Long can get more attention on the website and whether he can get better recommendation resources. After all, there are more monks than meat. The advantage of old authors over new authors is actually the inherent fans around them. In the past 2 years of writing radio broadcasts, Long also competed for a monthly ticket for publishing a single chapter last month. Most of the time, he was basically responsible for writing stories well. However, Long was approaching his 30s and had his own family, so he could not continue as before. Don't fight or grab. At this age, being relaxed and comfortable is actually a kind of irresponsibility for the family. Again, dear readers. Readers who are on a tight budget come to Gideon to add new books to their bookshelf, and Long is grateful for the addition of a new book to his collection. If you have money, $1 or $2 is also love, and $10 or $20 is love. If you have a lot of money, you can become a helmsman and leader to help Long's Incha support his reputation. That would be a boss. The new book title is He Came from Hell. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao Long. Chapter 1100. Below, there were many soldiers, but both Su Fu's side and the audience knew clearly that these hundreds of thousands of so-called Qin troops might only play the role of a cheerleading team in this duel. Even broadcasting cannot create a Qin army of this size in such a short period of time, and the reason why broadcasting is launched early is that it wants to take advantage of this batch of Qin troops before they have time to spread and grow. Decisive battle. Sure enough, the massive Qin army below began to retreat. A Qin army of about 400 people walked out of the military formation. In the center of the military formation, there was a chariot, and Su Fu was standing on the chariot. The roaring sound of the strong wind like a tsunami from the surrounding mountains did not make any sense to him. This was a decisive battle to determine the ownership of the two worlds. The reason why Su Fu arranged such a large battle, and it's not just to show off, he's not that boring to have so many new recruits come over to show off. But I want these recruits to witness this decisive battle. If my side wins, these hundreds of thousands of recruits will completely return to their hearts and integrate into the glory that belongs to Great Qin. If you lose here, there is no point in losing, and everything will return to dust. The train was still suspended in mid-air, and the door had been opened. Su Fu did not take the initiative to attack, but ordered the military formation composed of 400 evil stars around him to change. On both sides of the military formation, there was a cavalry of 30 people on each side. The Warhorse broadcast has been simulated in the story world. On one side were veterans who had fought against the beings under the command of darkness 2,000 years ago, and on the other were the audience members who had simulated battles with the Qin army again and again in the story world. Both sides actually know the basics. So, when the decisive battle comes, any temptation is meaningless. The key lies in this so-called strong battle, which side can have the last laugh. Jixiang was carrying a small skull bag, which contained some toys for the little guy. At this time, the little guy would definitely not be taken off the train by Subai. Jixiang and Ruyi surrounded the little guy and watched the little guy sit on the chair, playing with building blocks. Subai threw the cigarette butt on the ground, and after everyone else had gone out, he also walked out. Of course, the 5 hills do not mean that they are simply divided into 5 groups of people to fight on their own, especially at this time, it would be purely crazy to separate them. The Qin army has the Qin army's phalanx, and the audience here also has the routine summarized after several exercises in the story world. At the moment, 5 teams are lined up, and each team has melee fighters, formation mages, assassins, and those with super first level strength. The strong one. Subai was standing next to Hills, and no one was communicating or talking at this time, because even if you were the so-called big boss before, here, in this kind of battle situation, you are very likely to be annihilated, and there is not much difference between the soldiers who died in ordinary battlefields. A smile appeared at the corner of Su Fu's mouth. He could sense the fear of the audience in the air in front of him. They were afraid of him and the banner with the word Qin in it. Enter. Su Fu ordered. The chariot began to advance forward, and at the same time, the Qin army formation below also began to crush forward. The army of Great Qin has always used offense instead of defense, sweeping away all enemies in front of it with overwhelming force. It is difficult to distinguish the so-called good and evil sides in this war, because in the eyes of the audience, they themselves are the protagonists, and because the positions of their butts are different, their positions are naturally different. But if we analyze it according to the actual situation, then the audience is actually a representative of the puppet army. However, at this time, no one is carrying the banner of righteousness. Only survival has real meaning. Array Master. Array Master. The leaders of several teams began to summon the formation mages on their side to prepare for the enemy. Subai saw Boss Liang in front of him looking specifically towards him, but Subai pretended not to notice and ignored him. This left Boss Liang a little speechless, thinking that it was already at this point, and if Subai betrayed him, it would be very uncomfortable for his group. The formation master finished preparing, and the chaotic but 5-star order formations began to be laid out, providing the most perfect coverage. A terrifying evil spirit appeared above the Qin army's formation, which resisted all the formations. Su Fu kept waving his fly whisk to break the influence of these formations. The war unfolded at an unpredictable speed, but it also reached a climax at an unpredictable speed. Boss Liang, Chen Ru, Hills, and 2 other people took to the sky together and rushed directly towards the Qin army's formation ahead. Subai hesitated for a moment and followed, but trailed behind the other 5 people. For the rest, the formation masters continued to set up formations, while the close combatants consolidated the defense line, and were ready to rush forward once the sharp knives in front broke through the Qin army's formation or opened a gap. In this kind of atmosphere, it is difficult for you to have time to think calmly, and you have no chance to make the so-called hesitation. You can only make decisions based on your own instinct. This is no longer a simulated exercise story world created by broadcasting, but a real killing place. You will die. You will perish. You have no chance to come back. Boss Liang rushed directly into the military formation like a hungry wolf. But the military formations in front immediately dispersed, which was unexpected. The strength of the Great Qin military formations has been passed down for thousands of years, but this time, they have obviously undergone new changes. This kind of change has not been simulated by broadcasting. Boss Liang squeezed directly into the military formation, but evil stars appeared all around and directly hugged his legs and hands. This was a very rogue way, but also a very effective way. Even if Boss Liang inspired his terrifying power time and time again to beat the Qin soldiers in his body to a roaring roar, they would not let go. No, to be precise, even if they died, they would. He turned into a fierce ghost and continued to hang on Boss Liang. Chen Ru spread her hands and tried to cut through the position where Boss Liang entered. But rows of shields built the strongest line of defense. No matter Chen Ru's thunder bombardment, she still couldn't do anything. Hills attracted thousands of sword lights, which also penetrated towards the location of Boss Liang. The Qin army in this area did not make any defensive measures and endured the penetration of Hill's sword energy. However, because their injuries could be evenly distributed, they were able to maintain their shape. At the same time, he calmly drew his bow and arrow, aiming at Hills. Hills had to open up his defense and choose to avoid its sharp edge. He had understood the power of the Qin army's arrow formation, especially now, as a sharp knife in the attack, he did not have the blessing and protection of the magic formation around him. This time the assault was very simple, but the effect was far from ideal. Boss Liang was trapped in the military formation. Although his life was safe, he was like an old cow stuck in a quagmire and could not climb out in a short time. The same was true for the several assaults from other people on the periphery, with loud thunder and little rain. Attack! Su Fu waved his whisk, and the cavalry on both wings began to charge. This was considered a round of cover-up, and the purpose was actually to completely terminate the audience's assault. At the same time, the Qin army's military formation began to advance rapidly, at a speed that was unimaginable. The audience came, Su Fu was ready. The audience came, and Su Fu started the decisive battle directly. Perhaps, Su Fu is indeed too familiar with the psychology of the audience, so this time, directly turning the first contact into a decisive battle is undoubtedly a very successful strategy. Even Subai, who was standing in front, was confused for a moment. Should he go down to stop the Qin army, or choose to avoid its edge? Even Subai thought this way, so it was not difficult to predict the mentality of the more than 100 new bosses behind him. The Qin army is likely to decide the outcome in one battle. Amitabha. Infinite Heavenly Lord. The monk and the fat man. A man leads down a golden Buddha. One person leads the next Taoist. The power of Buddha and Tao is not to kill the enemy at this time, but to calm people's hearts. If people's hearts are divided and everyone has different thoughts, then there will be no need to fight this battle. A flute appeared in Ji Zhen's hand and began to play, and the melodious and exciting flute sound sounded. As an enhancer who is good at illusions, he knows better how to arouse the emotions of the people around him. At the same time, he knows best how to arouse the interest of his own boss. Subai took a deep breath, looked at Boss Liang who was still surrounded by the military formation, and passed directly over. The Qin army's swords came across, but Subai chose to ignore them and hit them with his whole body. Boom! A terrible loud noise was heard, and a row of shield soldiers on Subai's side were forced to retreat continuously, but the former retreated and the latter continued to make up for it, giving Subai no chance to cut inward. Boss Liang also became ruthless at this time. He is the most cowardly and timid. Therefore, Su Fu would fight with you as soon as he came up. He did not expect it. But at this time, he lost all other options, just like when he look at what it looks like when the inside is sealed. Buzz. 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 With the help of Subai's rapid offensive on the periphery, Boss Liang was able to take a lot of pressure off. However, he did not choose to break out. Instead, he continued to carry the Qin soldiers on his body and headed directly towards the center of the military formation. His goal. It's Su Fu. Boss Liang's sudden rise made Subai a little surprised. Su Fu's direct decisive battle was surprising but reasonable. However, Boss Liang's single-handed capture of the thief and the king almost completely destroyed his original personality. This moment. Subai may understand why Boss Liang was not allowed to get on the train during the last broadcast. Because Ji Zhen had not yet attained enlightenment at that time. Without Xie Zhen behind him, Boss Liang would not be able to unleash 100% combat effectiveness. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disiao. Chapter 1101. Boss Liang's sudden strength forcibly changed the melody of this decisive battle. He walked alone in the military formation, even though the surrounding was like a tidal wave, he remained unmoved, with a strange determination. Ji Zhen continued to play the flute, and his eyes were filled with the shadow of Boss Liang. These two men, when they work together at this time, really complement each other. Su Fu was sitting in the center of the army, standing on the chariot. When he saw Boss Liang advancing towards him, His eyes narrowed and he waved his fly whisk away to signal the Qin soldiers around him to retreat appropriately. The operation of the military formation is very tight and precise to the extreme. Boss Liang's current move is certainly a trap, but it is also like a stone thrown into the gears, which also affects the operation of the military formation. Now is not the time to spend time chewing rocks, but to crush the largest audience. Boss Liang only felt the pressure around him lighten, and the Qin soldiers around him began to retreat and regroup. At this moment, Subai cut across and broke the shields of two shield soldiers with both hands. Then his whole body turned into a blood mist and instantly pierced the body of a Qin soldier. The Qin soldier let out an angry roar, and countless blood holes appeared all over his body. His essence, blood, and vitality were completely absorbed by Subai in just an instant, and he could only turn into bones and kneel down. At this time, Boss Liang did not choose to leave by walking down the slope, but instead drilled into the military formation more aggressively than before. To the west and to the east, Subai and Boss Liang seemed to be competing, crazily squeezing the Qin army's formation from two directions. The power of these two people is like no other. There are more than 100 big guys present, and they are the ones who are the most popular right now. Chen Ryu started to follow up. At the same time, the circle of listeners in front began to exert pressure. After the initial shock, everyone's thoughts finally returned to the battlefield. Since there is no choice, then it's life and death. The formations were released one after another, and at the same time, batch after batch of melee intensifiers began to contact the Qin army's formation. It's just that compared to the Qin army's formation, the formation on the audience's side is still much looser. Now, they are just holding on with a little tacit understanding developed in the previous story worlds, but this is enough to help Subai and Liang Mori offset 80% of the pressure. Just like in ancient wars. The real killing time is often not when the two sides are arranging to fight each other, but when one side is defeated and the other side is chasing them. Therefore, even though both sides have very few casualties now, this is because they are still in formation and clashing with each other with their bastard shells, and there is no real bayonet blood yet. Hills appeared behind Subai and swept across with his sword. Subai turned his body slightly to one side. When Hill's sword energy penetrated the marching formation, he moved in again. The military formation is like a world of its own, like a barrier. When you want to move, soldiers will greet you from all directions, and you can't even grasp your own position. Of course, Subai had no intention of studying this formation, let alone determining his position. He just fought all the way through. This huge and terrifying war machine must be stopped before the audience's energy is exhausted. Otherwise it is very likely to kill everyone abruptly. Both parties actually understand each other and know what goals they need to achieve to win at this time. Everyone is doing their best in this link, because no one has a way out, and behind everyone is an abyss. Su Fu's figure disappeared at this moment, and the next moment, he appeared in front of Boss Liang. The whisk flowed elegantly, bringing with it ancient coercion. Boss Liang's whole body shone with cold light. He blocked the whisk with his body protecting aura, and at the same time took the initiative to attack. Su Fu no longer loves fighting. He teases you like a dragonfly, and then retreats. Then, he appears in front of Subai, pressing down with one hand. The power of sealing the sky is contained in the palm of his hand, which is just right for Subai's body. The zombies and vampire bloodline produce restraint. Subai took the initiative to attack and broke Su Fu's seal in an instant. Su Fu retreated again and appeared next to Hills, but was forced away by Hill's sword light again. He is like a ghost on the battlefield, looking here and wandering there, as if this is his circus and he is the clown. Su Fu's strange behavior did not arouse the suspicion of the audience, but this group of Qin soldiers was really difficult to deal with. Therefore, no one could spare time to think about other things for the time being. The monk has a mighty golden body and is protected by an arhat. He carries this side and keeps moving forward. Behind him, there are many big audience members who are working hard together. At least at this moment, at least at this time, no one hides anything, and no one spares any effort. The intrigues and selfishness among the audience cannot be seen at this time. Let's hold hands together, good brothers and sisters, and run towards a better future. That's the theme today. However, at this moment, Su Fu's figure rose into the air, and at the same time, the whisk in his hand collapsed. Also disintegrating were nearly 100 Qin soldiers below. They took a step forward before their bodies self-destruct, and a terrifying energy storm swept away. At this time, the array masters in the audience circle vomited blood and fell back, and some even had their bodies cracked. Previously, the Qin army relied on military formations for defense, while the audience relied on formation mages for defense. Now, 100 Qin soldiers self-destruct without hesitation, directly breaking the defense between the audience, and the remaining the Qin soldiers completely dispersed at this time, charging forward like wild horses that had escaped the reins. Su Bai kicked away a Qin soldier who was trying to attack him, and punched a Qin soldier into a big hole in his chest. However, it seemed difficult for him to change the entire situation at one point. Puff. After the audience at the front lost the blessing of the formation master, their imperfect cooperation was almost completely flawed in the eyes of the Qin soldiers, and the terrible damage caused by the first batch of Qin soldiers who self-destruct was also considerable. Most of the audience they suffered heavy injuries before they could react. Then, the follow-up Qin soldiers who harvested their lives chopped off their heads without hesitation, and crushed their souls with them. When some Qin soldiers rush over, you attack them and they don't defend themselves at all. Instead, they risk their lives to hold you down, and then their companions come up to kill you. This kind of sudden bayonet attack with no cover at all really caught the audience off guard. Su Fu was ruthless, and Qin Bing was even more ruthless. This behavior of only treating the lives of his soldiers as a string of data that could be consumed at any time is indeed a bit shocking. Puff. The fat man's chest was pierced by a sword. The fat man staggered back desperately, but the Qin soldier pushed forward without giving the fat man any chance to breathe. Fatty had been seriously injured when Qin Bing blew himself up before. Faced with this situation now, he was really helpless. In fact, in just a short moment, no fewer than 50 of the bosses fell, and the Qin soldiers' losses were 3 times greater than those of the audience. But now, the remaining 200 Qin soldiers have an absolute advantage, and they are still facing the following. The remaining less than 100 listeners began the hunt. The formation has been messed up, the rhythm has been messed up. Even the previous momentum collapsed amidst the self-destruction of Qin Bing and the subsequent rapid cover-up. It is most appropriate to describe the situation at this time by saying that the army was defeated like a mountain. Moreover, at this time, 2 big men actually chose to leave the battlefield. When they left the battlefield, Qin Bing did not choose to pursue them, but chose to let them go. But the domino effect caused by this approach began to ferment rapidly. Su Fu was still standing in the air, witnessing with his own eyes everything that was happening below. These are the stuff of dogs. Boss Liang let out an angry roar. He saw the escaped boss audience, and also saw one of Ji Zhen's arms being chopped off by Chang Ji. However, Boss Liang was entangled by several generals of the Qin army, and he could not go to the rescue. Boom! Qin Bing flipped the long sword, and the fat man's body collapsed at this moment. His soul came out of his body, but he faced the Qin Bing's even faster attack. Boom! Buddha rushed over at this moment and knocked the Qin soldier away, relieving the fat man's crisis. My Buddha is compassionate. The monk sat cross-legged in the battlefield, surrounded by Buddha's light. The Dharma god began to burn, along with several Qin soldiers around him. Chen Ryu killed several Qin soldiers in succession, but in the end she was unable to cope with it. Faced with another round of Qin soldiers' siege, she had to retreat. The effect of Hill's sword light became worse and worse each time. It seems that bosses are falling every moment, and Qin soldiers are dying every moment. This is the most advanced slaughterhouse. Boom. Boom. The two audience bosses who had just escaped from the battle collapsed immediately. It was not the Qin soldiers who attacked them, but the broadcaster who crushed the life cards. The two big listeners died directly. This time, the broadcast was very decisive, because the broadcast was clear and he had no way out. Therefore, we must never allow the situation of fleeing without a fight to occur again. At this time, the big boss who was originally eager to escape from this Shura field had to bite the bullet and continue to fight. Killing. Still going on. Even though the Qin army had gained the upper hand, the resistance of the audience was still not extinguished. After all, there is no option to surrender. All around, the newly formed indigenous Qin army watching the battle began to sing war songs. They had already felt that the balance of victory was already tilting towards their side. For Sufu, it didn't matter even if all the 500 evil stars were consumed, as long as give him time, and he can make the Qin take root and rise again in this world. No matter what the price is, as long as these dark lackeys are killed. Everything. It's all worth it. Subai had just repelled the two Qin soldiers in front of him. Earlobes. Then a woman whispered in a low voice. Have you had enough fun? We still have serious things to do. This voice. It's from Lichi. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1102. The surroundings are still being slaughtered, and powerful lives are dying like grass here, becoming extremely cheap, as if the most precious art paintings are being burned with fire, just for the simplest purpose of keeping warm. But the sound of Lichi made Subai feel like he was temporarily separated. Yes. The battlefield is the most disorienting place, because only the most primitive killing is left in your mind, and the tension, excitement, and passion run through your entire emotion. Even Subai is not exempt from vulgarity. Just now, he was completely immersed in this atmosphere. He saw the fat man's physical body being destroyed, he saw the Buddha holding a hatchet to block the Qin soldiers' offensive again and again, and he saw the monk already burning his Dharma body. Lichi's voice was silent, but it woke him up directly. You still have things to do. I'm waiting for you. I've been waiting for you for so long. You should have had enough fun. It's time to get down to business. This is probably what Lichi means. Perhaps, for Lichi, she doesn't care about the outcome of this conflict at all. What she wants to do is revenge. Her hatred is no less than that of Subai, and even more extreme than Subai, because Lichi and Haimai they can all be used like garbage, but Subai at least still has some ties to it. But to pull away at this time. Subai believed that if he expressed his desire to leave, Su Fu would not stop him. He was eager to leave. But if he leaves, the fat man, the monk, and Buddha will be even more in danger. Life is actually a process of constant making choices. It is obvious that Lizzie's patience has been exhausted. She has been waiting here for so long, and even spent time to avoid the Qin army's detection of her. The purpose is to wait for Subai to come over. But Subai directly became the audience and began to fight with the Qin army. For the sake of broadcasting? For the existence of that doggy couple? You and I have been played like this by them, and you still fight for them? How ridiculous. Don't bother me. Subai said to himself, but he believed that Lichi could hear his words. Then, Subai joined the battle group again. The fighting continues. But the number of big bosses in the audience began to decrease. There were originally nearly 1,670 big bosses, but now there were less than 60 left, and the momentum of the Qin army became more and more powerful. Boss, it's really worthless here. Death is only a matter of minutes. Everyone worked hard to survive in the gu-raising mode, but in the end, most of them just wanted to be cannon fodder for a moment. It's ironic and cold, but it's a fact. The fat man's soul was protected by Buddha, but Buddha himself was no longer able to protect himself. The Qin soldiers' offensive gradually made it difficult for him to resist. The monk was now in a state of depression, especially when Su Fu appeared in front of him and pointed his finger at the center of the monk's eyebrows. The monk's soul was severely damaged and he flew backwards. If Su Bai hadn't helped the monk stop several Qin soldiers in time, the monk might have been cut into pieces. Xie Zhen on one side is even more unbearable. Boss Liang is entangled and has no time to care. Xie Zhen's illusion can't take too much advantage in this simple primitive fight of close combat. He is also scarred now and is very critical. Over there, Boss Liang roared from time to time, but it was of no avail. Several generals just stared at him and pestered him. Chen Ryu and Hills are still fighting, and others are also fighting, but what everyone is competing for now is nothing more than exchanging heads for heads. But what is very cruel is that even if Qin Bing had to self-destruct 100 Pao Zi in the beginning, despite the stage advantage, at this stage, the number of Qin soldiers is still much greater than the audience. Especially on the other side, there were 50 Qin soldiers who were ready to go. This was the backup force Su Fu had left for himself, and it could also be regarded as a new force. With these 50 Qin soldiers as the basis of the original formation, the military formation began to continue to approach the battle circle. At the same time, the Qin soldiers who had originally fought began to consciously return to formation. Like a snowball, they formed another army of nearly 200 people. A military formation with many people. But now, the audience circle, which has been messed up and suffered heavy casualties, is no longer able to form a formation or fight against the Qin army in the same way as before. The Qin army's military formation was crushing, and the hundreds of thousands of indigenous Qin soldiers who were watching around them kept roaring and roaring. It is as if a passionate symphony performance is about to reach its true peak at this moment, which also means the curtain call is coming. Boom! Boss Liang tore a Qin soldier in front of him into pieces. At the same time, 3 long swords were inserted into his body at the same time, but the next moment he broke the long swords in his body and finally got rid of the entanglement and came to Ji Zhen's side. Ji Zhen knelt on the ground and had no strength to speak. Jijiao Lao Qin, we will fight against the national calamity together. We will fight until the blood is shed dry. The ancient war song sounded. The army marched forward with a roar. One after another, in front of this military formation, the big bosses died, their bodies collapsed, and their souls were shattered. This Qin army was like a vacuum cleaner, beginning its final cleaning. Su Bai's figure fell next to the monk and others, and the remaining nearly 50 audience members slowly gathered together, and everyone was making their last breaths. In fact, the outcome has been completely tilted, and the defeat can only be finalized. The spear is in front, the shield is in front, and the crossbowman is behind. The military formation continued to advance, one after another, devouring the lives of the big bosses in the audience. Dabai, let's go. Fatty's spirit now seemed very sluggish. Let's go and do what you want to do. We have already lost. Buddha also looked at Dabai and nodded. They have no choice. They must fight here until the end and wait for the result. But Su Bai is different. He had other options. At least. Even if the final outcome is death, Su Bai can still do the thing he always wanted to do before his death. After reaching this level, Su Bai could be said to have done his best to them. In fact, the audience who came this time were not without the ability to fight, but it was difficult to win because you couldn't let the audience choose to sacrifice themselves for the overall situation like those Qin soldiers. Everyone fights to survive, not for any righteousness, nor to sacrifice themselves for others. But the Qin army over there is different. They are willing to give everything they have for a belief and the rebirth of that dynasty. The Qin army's military formation has been pushed over, but the audience has no way to retreat. Buddha picked up the hatchet again, and the monk also stood up. Boss Liang and others over there also took the initiative to greet him again. Even if the ending is to be crushed by this rolling torrent, at least we can hold on for a while longer and delay for a while longer. Not for victory, but to make his death appear a little more valuable and atmospheric. What a ridiculous reason and motive, but these are the only voices left in the audience. Subai also stood up, but he still didn't leave. To be honest, this is really not the time to act impulsively. But for some reason, Subai didn't want to leave, especially after he left. Fatty Monk Foya and the others would fall one after another. Do you still want to die with them? Lichi's voice came again. Have you forgotten your hatred? Have you forgotten your determination for revenge? Subai dismissed Lichi's reminder. He had more than one thing to do, but at this time, he really couldn't weigh it. Can only. Just look at the present. You can't die, you can't be so naive. Lizzie continued to ramble on. This woman used to treat Subai like words, and one sentence could give Subai several layers of meaning, but now, she finally let go of everything. She is poison. But Subai was the final bayonet. She knew that poison could not kill them, and Subai would need to deliver the last blow. If Subai died in battle foolishly like this, so what's the point of her forbearance? However, Subai really didn't care about her reminder. War situation. It's getting intense again. Boss Liang carried the seriously injured Xie Zhen and continued to fight. Buddha's hatchet broke, and his whole body was pierced by Chang Ji and lifted up. The monk was forcibly trampled, shielded, and hammered repeatedly. The fat man's spirit kept trembling under the crossbow arrows and was about to collapse. Subai's eyes were red, and he ignored several weapons piercing his body, and used his fangs to tear the neck of a Qin soldier in front of him, tearing off his soul along with it. More than a dozen Qin soldiers stabbed Subai with their weapons, turning Subai's body into a hornet's nest, but Subai still clamped his feet firmly on the ground, competing with each other for strength. Chen Ru, Hills, Yan Huiyang, Piao Lu, and other big bosses who are still alive are still making their final struggles. This scene cannot be said to be tragic, but tragic. Su Fu floated in the air, with a stern smile on his lips. 2,000 years ago. This war spanned 2,000 years. The Qin. Finally going to win. God bless the Qin dynasty. God bless Zilong. Be a human being, isn't it? At this moment, the words of Lao Fugui appeared in Subai's mind. Only. This world forces you to become a ghost. Ah. More than a dozen Qin soldiers pushed their weapons forward, and Subai was pushed backwards by them. There was blood all the way down. Buddha was pierced by Chang Ji and began to tear apart, his body almost being torn in half. Fatty's soul was hit by a crossbow arrow and began to slowly dissipate. The monk's body has begun to crack and his vitality is almost exhausted. Boss Liang couldn't fight anymore, and the Xie Zhen on his back was dying. Chen Ru was suppressed by a row of shield soldiers, and long spears stabbed into his body crazily. Pilalu blocked Yan Huiyang's blow and collapsed himself. Die. As if in the next moment. Death knell. It's about to ring. On the train. The little guy is building his own blocks. He knew that his father asked him to stay here and play by himself. Then my father will come to pick me up. My father said that he will not leave me behind. If he wants to leave, let's go together. So. He wants to listen to his father. Stay here and play well. Play seriously. The little guy is smiling because his blocks are stacking higher and higher. Without his naughty daddy who likes to do little damage, he is stacking blocks more and more smoothly. But the little guy's eyes were filled with tears. He was laughing. I'm crying too. Daddy, Xian Xian is good, Xian Xian is good. The little guy who could only say the word Baba at first can finally say other words. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 1103. You are not allowed to die. At this time, Li Ji, who had been quietly observing all this in a corner, finally took action. As soon as this woman appeared, she caused a thunderstorm. There is indeed no doubt about her strength, but at the moment, even joining Li Ji cannot reverse the almost collapsed battle situation. Moreover, Li Ji's appearance is not to reverse anything. She just doesn't want to see Subai just like this. Spend it here. Boom. There was a loud noise, and the group of Qin soldiers in front of Subai were instantly forced back by this majestic force. Su Fu's eyes condensed, and the whisks flew up, sweeping over directly. You, the fish that slipped through the net, are finally willing to let go. God knows how much effort Su Fu spent on finding Li Ji during this period, but this woman had a weird way to block his own detection of her. Now, since she has appeared, let's solve it once and for all. Today. It's here. Everything will come to an end. Da Qin's new life is destined to start today. Li Ji's injury was obviously not healed, but the heroic spirit between her brows and the sharpness of her rivalry could not be blocked. Even if Su Fu personally took action, Li Ji just waved with one hand, and the two rays of light swept directly across in the past. Su Fu did not dare to rely on others, so he had to use magic to resolve it. He. Having more than a dozen weapons inserted into his body was definitely not a comfortable thing. Although Qin Bing was temporarily forced back, Subai was more like a hedgehog nailed here. Come with me. Li Ji looked at Subai. We're going to take revenge. Subai raised his head slightly. Looking at this woman. To be honest, he was not very familiar with this woman. Before, his strength was low and he had no sense of existence in her eyes. Then, he did have a sense of existence in her eyes now, but to Li Ji, he was just another Jamie May. If we lose, won't the broadcast also die? Subai looked at Li Ji with a sarcastic smile. Yes. We lose. Isn't it the end of broadcasting? Isn't it the end of Su Yuhang and Lu Menjiao? Isn't our revenge just avenged? Before, Subai might still be wondering whether he would help Su Yuhang survive if he won, but now, he no longer needs to worry about this issue. Because the audience has no hope of winning right now. I'm going to kill them with my own hands. Li Ji replied. No, you're not going to kill them with your own hands. You want to be them. These are Subai's inner words. At this point, if Subai still can't see the true purpose of Li Ji, then it's really all in vain. Your revenge is to become the person you hate the most. No one can judge whether Li Ji's behavior is right or wrong, because everyone has their own calculations and opinions from their own standpoint. Why bother? Subai asked. We have already lost. Yes, I have already lost. Even if you replace Su Yuhang at this time. What solutions do you have to solve the dilemma before you? This country has been lost, the rebels have entered the capital. This dragon chair. Do we still need to fight? Just to have fun sitting on it for a short time? Funny, really funny. He won't watch as he loses. Li Ji stared at Subai. Believe me, they won't watch as they lose. Subai broke away from Li Ji's hand. Wisps of will-o'-the-wisps rose up from his body, and he rushed into the battle again. Boom. There was a loud noise. Subai knocked away the two shield soldiers and pulled out the scarred monk. Then, Subai forced himself up and pulled out the Buddha whose body had been stabbed with several holes. As for the fat man's almost dissipated spirit, Subai put it into his mouth and cultivated it with his own essence and blood, so that it would not dissipate immediately. But there are fewer and fewer big audience members around. There are only a few 30 or 40 people left who are still making the final resistance. No. It is a final struggle. Subai forcibly burned his origin, protected the monk, Buddha, and the fat man beside him, and then sat down. A group of Qin soldiers quickly gathered around him. Their weapons were pointed at Subai and they slowly pressed on him. At this moment, Subai understood how the overlord of Western Chu felt back then. He was at the end of his rope, he could leave, but he couldn't. Dabai, you are almost dead, but you still let the fat man touch you. Fatty's voice sounded in Subai's body. Go and do what you want to do. Our friendship doesn't have to be so restrictive anymore. Ha 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 ha, at worst, Fatty won't remember you for always mentioning the black crematorium to me. When a person is about to die, his words are good. Especially in this situation, Subai almost did the best he could. Amitba. The monk chanted a slogan with great effort, in the next life, this poor monk will pray for you and others. For a monk, he can't say provocative words, he won't shed tears, and he won't fully express his emotions. But at this moment, perhaps, the only thing he can say is the next life. If I still have another life. There are several huge holes in the Buddha's body that cannot be restored and are getting bigger. He had fallen into a coma, or maybe it was because this rough man didn't know how to face such a tragic moment. It would be better to faint in a daze. Then he died in a daze. Let's die together. Subai turned his head, ignoring the Qin soldiers who were slowly pressing up beside him, and instead looked at the train in the sky. His own son. Still inside. He is waiting for himself. But this time. I was afraid that I would disappoint him. As a father, it is indeed very unpleasant to fail to show the strength and stature similar to Superman in front of his son. But time is also destiny. This ending. Just one last kick away. Lychee stood on the same spot, Su Fu stood opposite her, the chi of both sides blocked each other, Su Fu was waiting for his Qin soldiers to kill all the remaining listeners, and finally, together they killed this woman. He is not in a hurry. There's really no rush. As a winner, he has the right to slowly enjoy and taste this hard-won joy and sense of accomplishment. 2,000 years of planning, 2,000 years of sleeping, 2,000 years of forbearance, 2,000 years of waiting. Finally got this moment. Everything. That means it's all worth it? Lychee didn't move either. She watched helplessly as one audience after another disappeared. Seeing that the scale of this battlefield is being compressed step by step. Watching this last bit of hope for broadcasting slowly fade away. She is also waiting for that person. Ji Xiangruyi, quietly lying on the chair, watching the little guy crying and laughing while building blocks. And at this moment, a figure appeared. The little guy raised his head and looked at the middle-aged man standing next to him. Jixiang and Ruyi cast a fearful and complicated look. Behind the middle-aged man, there was a woman standing. Menu, have you ever thought that one day we will have grandchildren? Su Yuhang asked with a smile. Lu Menjiu behind Su Yuhang remained calm. It's not that I'm aloof. It's because her consciousness is not with her at this time. Su Yuhang picked up the little guy, and the two black cats jumped up instantly, but the next moment, the two black cats were thrown out heavily, and at the same time, two seals directly restrained them. Even for Jixiang, Su Yuhang didn't retain any old feelings. This ship is going to sink. Su Yuhang sighed, it encountered ice and blocked its way, so someone had to get off the ship and smash the ice. Then. Only then can our ship continue to sail. Su Yuhang seemed like a kind elder, telling stories to his descendants. I'm the one who's getting off the boat. After saying that, Su Yuhang looked at Lu Menjiu behind him. At this moment, Su Yuhang broke away from the broadcast consciousness and manifested alone, which was equivalent to changing from the broadcast consciousness back to the identity of a listener. The couple was singing a duet, and Lu Menjiao continued to control the broadcast in the consciousness of the broadcast. He would not go back until Su Yuhang went down to resolve the matter. Aren't you afraid? If you move the ice floe away, the ship will sail away on its own without waiting for you. Lu Menjiao, who had always been silent, spoke at this time. You are the person I love most. Su Yuhang smiled slightly. I am willing to believe you. Then, Su Yuhang looked at the little guy in his arms. After that day more than 20 years ago, I have no future. So, look. People under the train. You are not afraid of your grandpa and me. However, your destiny is the same as mine. What's yours can also be considered mine. Good. Dear grandson. Lend your future to grandpa. Grandpa promises not to let your father die. How about it? Even if Su Yuhang comes out, he is just an ordinary preacher. He ruined his future in order to kill the rich and powerful. At the moment, he wants to find his future. Get your future back from this child who was created by Mr. Zhao and has the same fate as yourself. Once he owns the future, he regains the almost wasted 20 years. 20 years. As someone who could be called brothers to people of Lao Fugui's level in the past. Once you find your lost years and future, how terrifying will he become? The little guy looked at Jixiang and Ruyi, who were sealed but still struggling on the train with some confusion. Then he looked at Su Yuhang in confusion. At last, he looked at the blocks he had just piled up. Daddy. The little guy murmured to himself. Below, Su Fu, who was confronting Li Ji, raised his eyebrows slightly. Yo. In the train. There's actually one person who hasn't come down yet. But he's just an ordinary coward. As for Li Ji, after sensing the aura, her face showed excitement. It's finally out. No one would have thought that a baby was actually making decisions in the train, but this didn't seem to be very strange to this baby. Years ago, the monk and Buddha once told the baby, as long as he crawls towards the demon cave, the man who had carried him since birth would survive. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1104. This is a contest that no one can afford to lose. Broadcasting and these remnants of the Qin dynasty can only survive, and there is absolutely no way to coexist. Su Yuhang's appearance cannot be said to be an accident, because everything is reasonable. After all, if he does not come out at this time, the radio audience will completely lose any hope of making a comeback. In fact, for Su Yuhang, coming out and going in actually means a decrease in the level of life. Even if he finds his future, even if he picks up the lost 20 years again, he still has no way to integrate with the broadcast time. Compare. This is a pursuit of the level of life. This is the most terrifying poppy. Few people can resist this temptation. Perhaps, at this time, Su Yuhang's original purpose of recruiting someone to inherit the broadcasting consciousness was realized. Maybe Su Yuhang had thought of this day for a long time, or maybe it was what Mr. Zhao did before committing suicide. Deduction. If Su Yuhang is the only one who integrates the broadcasting consciousness, then when he leaves, the broadcasting consciousness will cease to exist and turn into the purest rule operation, or a new consciousness, Magpie's Nest Jazan, will be born. Su Yuhang could come out, but couldn't go in again. And now, he came out. But Lu Menjiao is still inside. After Su Yuhang finished these things, Lu Menjiao could still open the door and let him go back. It's like a wife opening the door for her husband when he comes home from the night shift. Reason. Very simple. It seems to work like this. No problem. When the battle here was about to end, the aura of an ordinary preacher on the train suddenly became high. That kind of self-confidence that looks down upon everything. As if it had turned into a real storm. Let all around. They all began to tremble. After planning for so long. hibernating for more than 20 years. Standing behind the scenes. Pointing and pointing. Even when speaking, I have to cover my mouth. Even after becoming a part of the broadcast, he appears again and again, only with a powerless clone. Such a life cannot be considered absolutely perfect. Especially for Su Yuhang, an overconfident person, whether it was Su Bai's resistance or Lizzie's plan, or Boss Liang's disdain for him when he was under the sea in Qinhuangdao. Su Yuhang himself also thought about it. If my true self is still there. If you are still there in the future. If I still have these 20 lost years. So. Do these little minions still dare to talk to themselves like this? After being at ease for a long time, I always want to do something. I lie in the same position for a long time and always turn over. Su Yuhang came out wearing a white gown. He was elegant but not very elegant, because the unruliness in his gestures had nothing to do with elegance. Maybe the outer skin is the outer skin after all, that chess, calligraphy and painting style such a proficient talent is just the side of him that shows others. The real him has a very strong ambition and the will to do whatever it takes to satisfy his ambition. Under this majestic pressure, the Qin army subconsciously stopped killing, which gave the remaining bosses some breathing space. However, the way they looked at Su Yuhang also seemed a little complicated. Played with by the radio. Like being toyed with by a man. This feeling is different. Broadcasting can be said to be like God, and God's will can only make people helpless. But Su Yuhang, the essence of his existence is actually the same as himself and others. Especially since this man could come out and possess such terrifying power, yet he allowed these people to die and be consumed first. Sitting behind the scenes, drinking drinks and cracking melon seeds, watching my side fight to the death, maybe even slightly applauded and shouted wonderful. Formation. Su Fu finally realized it. He didn't have time to think too much, because the Qin army was still in a dispersed state. Before, the victory or defeat had been decided, and there was only the last process left, so the Qin army basically dispersed to kill the enemy. And now, mutation happened. Su Yuhang is a confident and arrogant person, but he did not stand aside and wait silently for the Qin army to form a formation. In fact, his figure appeared in the battle in the next step. Hiss. White breath circulated. Like water vapor evaporating from a hot spring. But in an instant, the lives of Qin soldiers were taken away. Qin soldiers' armor. The weapons of Qin soldiers. Qin Bing's terrifying body. In front of these white Qi, everything becomes meaningless. In almost the blink of an eye, dozens of Qin soldiers were cut into pieces and scattered all over the hillside. This is not a war. This is massacre. This is like a stage for Su Yuhang's personal splash ink performance, where he can fully display his own art. Su Fu roared angrily. At this time, he no longer looked like an immortal, and he had no immortal spirit to speak of. Indeed, half a minute ago, he was expected to be a contributor to the resurgence of the dynasty, but now, it seems that he has to be relegated to the position of the old and the young. Everything beautiful was beckoning in front of his eyes, but suddenly it fell to pieces. The majestic thoughts came down, which was Su Fu's counterattack. He couldn't figure out, since there was such a person in the audience, what was the significance of the previous confrontation. A writing brush appeared in Su Yuhang's hand, and he easily blocked Su Fu's attack. He smiled, as if he had seen through Su Fu's anger. Slowly said, "When I do things, I only pursue 100%. At the beginning, if you all form a complete formation, I am not absolutely sure, and there will be no absolute opportunity for me." Even though Su Fu was good at calculations, it was impossible to calculate the relationship between Su Yuhang and the broadcast in a short period of time. He only knew that this man was terrible, so terrible that even he felt a sense of powerlessness in his heart. Reversal of identity. The exchange of hunter and prey. It happened so quickly. Both sides were caught off guard. Of course, some people still know what to do. Lychee's figure disappeared from the spot. Although she was injured before, she did not suffer much loss in the battle just now. Su Yuhang naturally noticed this from the corner of his eye, but let Li Ji leave. As for Subai, he was still sitting over there. The fat man's soul was still in Subai's body and was being warmed and nourished. The monk and Buddha were also lying next to him. This place was like a wounded soldier's camp. Opposite Subai, Boss Liang was treating Xie Zhen's life regardless of his own injuries. Those who survived were all in a state of lingering and jumping around. There is only Su Yuhang now. Boom. When Su Fu was strangled by Su Yuhang's neck with one hand, he was grabbed directly from the air and smashed to the ground. The hundreds of thousands of nearby native Qin troops were silent for a while. In front of this powerful man who is like a god descending to earth. The so-called faith and loyalty they had finally built up by Su Fu immediately fell apart. "Are you angry?" Fatty asked from inside Subai. Subai didn't answer. Su Fu was kicked forward and landed hard in front of Subai. Then, Su Yuhang floated over and stepped on Su Fu's face with one foot. This is a kind of disdain and a kind of disregard. Su Yuhang will not give any face to his opponent. He is not so good-tempered even when he treats his own flesh and blood. So, do you understand now why I manifested and broke the rules again and again before? Su Yuhang raised his head. This sentence was said to Subai. He was watching a monkey show. This is his pleasure and his pastime. Subai stood up slowly and stared at Su Yuhang. Su Yuhang smiled slightly, stretched out his hand and stabbed into Su Fu's chest, directly crushing Su Fu's spirit. Actually, you are qualified to be a human being. Su Yuhang was a little surprised. He didn't expect Subai to say this to him. My own son. Shouldn't he come up in a hurry and fight with himself and then ask himself crazily what he did to his son? But the current style of painting is a bit baffling. Su Yuhang, on the other hand, hates this inexplicable feeling, because it means that things are not 100% under his control. Have you found the lost years? Subai asked again. He. If old Fugui hadn't died, he would still be standing by your side. Subai sighed. What do you want, but you can't get it? Yes. The you now. It is enough to kill Su Fu by one person and destroy the remaining formation of the Qin army by one person. If old Fugui is by your side and he is not dead yet. You two friends, what do you need to be afraid of? Lao Fugui didn't even have the heart to fight back when you tried to kill him. What do you want? As long as you can get it and do it, he won't help you get it. Are you educating me? Su Yuhang pointed at his face, and you're educating me with his original tone. I still want to hit you, Subai said. I will not kill you. Su Yuhang shook his head. I will fulfill my promise to you. You and your son will live peacefully in this world for thousands of years, including your so-called friends. I remember I never promised you, Subai said with a smile. I have never promised you. You have to be lucky. There is always someone who is always good for you, so you need to cherish it. Are you out? Subai asked. Right. Then can you go back? Subai asked again. So, I kept my son and goddaughter with me, but your mother didn't dare not let me go back. You plotted against your friends, you plotted against your wife, you plotted against your son, and you plotted against your daughter. Su Yuhang, do you think your life has been interesting? My life has just begun, Su Yuhang replied. Compared with the vast years that will follow, I am nothing now. Subai turned his head slightly, and energy fluctuations began to ripple around his body. At the moment, Subai's condition was not very good, but he had said that when Su Yuhang appeared in front of him in a real sense, he would kill him. How do you compare to him? If it weren't for the person in his body who didn't allow him to take action against Subai, Su Yuhang wouldn't bother talking to Subai so much. Su Fu's body was kicked by Su Yuhang and flew to Subai. The meaning is very simple. Do you still need to take action? I never promised you. Subai repeated the sentence again. Su Yuhang smiled slightly. But soon, his expression changed. On the train, Jixiang and Ruyi were still sealed on the ground, unable to move. Lu Menjiao sat on her seat. In front of her, the child, her nominal grandson, was still building blocks. The blocks are already very high. The baby's pupils are no longer clear and spiritual, and have become a little cloudy. The soul boy has become a little mediocre. Became an ordinary child. At this time, Lichi entered the train. He's out, Lichi said. So, Lu Menjiao smiled. It's like a mother looking at her naughty daughter. Will you let him in again? Lizzie asked again. You should learn from the father and son. Lu Menjiao pointed at the little guy who was still building blocks. 1,000 years of peace is the best reward. Xiaobai is not willing to accept it, but his child made the wisest choice for him. Crash la 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 la. At this moment, the little guy suddenly overturned all the building blocks neatly piled high in front of him. Two small hands slapped the table hard. He cried in a baby voice. Shouting. Very excited. It's crazy. Lu Menjiao was stunned. Because at that moment, the little guy took the initiative to end his own future. Personally. After burying myself. Pa, pa, pa. The little guy's tender hands were still slapping the table. No one knows what he is shouting. No one could understand what he was shouting. But when Ji Xiang, who was sealed on the ground, saw this scene, he. But I thought of the scene when that man was ill before. His son, imitating him. It is natural for a son to imitate his father. Come. Hurt each other. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1105. Wisps of white smoke spilled out of Su Yuhang's body, which meant that the future Su Yuhang had just gained, the 20 years he had just regained, were slowly leaving him. Many villains die because they talk too much, but Su Yuhang is not because he talks too much, but because since his future is borrowed from his grandson, he naturally cannot take action against Subai, and he has another. If Subai is here and Lichi is here, his wife will not dare not let him go home. Integrating into the broadcast and becoming a living being that is superior or even superior to the plane of the world is an irresistible temptation. It is equally difficult to refuse to share it with two people and to dominate it with one person. No one knows what will happen to the person they say they love most, the person they say they love, in the end. When a person acts alone, he will inevitably judge others by himself. Therefore, even when facing Lu Menjiao, Su Yuhang is always calculating. In the past, the reason why Mr. Zhao chose to commit suicide was probably because Mr. Zhao could not see his own future. This game was destined to end dismally, so Mr. Zhao did not intend to play it anymore. Su Yuhang took over, first tricked and killed the old rich man, and then designed a poison to successfully obtain the broadcasting consciousness qualification from Mr. Zhao. With the help of his own various plans, he appeared to turn the tide when this group of listeners basically failed. The Qin army has collapsed. Su Fu is dead. He Su Yuhang. Almost all obstacles have been cleared. He suddenly brought a dead game to life. However, no matter what, at this time, that little baby dared to ruin his future by himself, just as decisively as when he killed the rich and powerful. This was something Su Yuhang never expected. He calculated Subai's behavior, calculated Li Ji's behavior, calculated Lu Menjiao's behavior, and even Boss Liang's group of people were also included in his calculations. He took a desperate risk and got something out of the fire. But he felt he could succeed. But right now. But there is a trend of falling short of success. Unless my son choose to let go of hatred at this time. But is it possible? If the little guy doesn't ruin his future, Su Yuhang can maintain his absolute advantage. Neither Lichi nor Subai can act arrogantly, and they have no right to act arrogantly. Their wives will also open the door to let them go back. Although it is a thrilling single-plank bridge, it is possible to succeed. But now, Su Yuhang himself doesn't believe it. When his grandson chooses to cheat him at all costs. My son, whose life has been devoted to revenge for almost half of his life. Will you remain indifferent? Subai did not disappoint Su Yuhang, because he came over, and the fat man's weak soul was sent out by Subai, letting it linger beside the monk, because next. You have to fight yourself. When the scarred Subai walked towards Su Yuhang, he picked up a Qinbing weapon from the ground. It was a sword, a bronze sword. The formation patterns on it had long been damaged, but its hardness was still the same. There is no doubt about it. The monk cast his gaze here, as did the remaining members of the audience. They knew what Subai was going to do. He's going to beat his own father. He's going to play broadcast. The white air gradually stopped dissipating. Everything about Su Yuhang has returned to that day more than 20 years ago, when he ruined his future and killed wealth and wealth. So, his strength, his realm, it stayed on that day forever. A being who has just attained enlightenment. Perhaps. The boss is very awesome and powerful. No matter which world you look at, unless there is a life level as high as broadcasting, a life at the level of the boss is definitely at the top of the pyramid. But broken down. Among the big guys, there are also 3, 6, or 9 levels. Unfortunately, Subai is definitely rare among the big guys. Even if he is injured now, he is still like a centipede. No more talk, Su Yuhang smiled slightly and looked at Subai. Talk about your mother's neighbor. Snapped. A sword struck him horizontally. Su Yuhang subconsciously put up his own defense, but it collapsed instantly in front of Subai's majestic power. The blade of the sword hit the side of Su Yuhang's face, sending his whole body flying away. Subai continued to walk forward. At this moment, only the most primitive swear words and abuse can vent the boundless anger accumulated in one's heart. This moment. This day. I have been waiting for too long. He. Su Yuhang got up. The surrounding space was blocked by Subai, so he couldn't leave. Ridiculous. It's also ironic. This man who had just defeated the Qin army, destroyed the last hope of Qin, and killed Su Fu at the same time. In a blink of an eye. He became so embarrassed. Things are impermanent. Things really are unpredictable. Do you think you are very elegant? Subai approached Su Yuhang again. Su Yuhang was still smiling. Boom. Subai gets close to you directly. Su Yuhang's movement skills are very wonderful, but Subai doesn't compete with you at all. He just uses his strength to overwhelm others. I just want to be unreasonable with you and force you to be confrontational. Su Yuhang's neck was pinched by Subai. Then Subai pressed him to the ground hard. A big hole instantly appeared on the ground. But Subai wasn't over yet. He held down the back of Su Yuhang's head again and again, and smashed it against the hard ground again and again. Once. Twice. 3 times. 15 times. 25 times. Come. Is this feeling familiar to you? The you were back then. Isn't it just pressing my head like this? Did you press me into the culture medium again and again? This taste is very comfortable, right? Enjoyed it? My, good daddy. Today, I also let you enjoy it. Come. Tell me. Is it comfortable? Is it comfortable? Your son's filial piety towards you. Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied? Bang. 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 No matter how many times I get hit. Su Yuhang still kept smiling, still maintaining his demeanor. Perhaps this is the real Su Yuhang. He is reserved. But there is no real bottom line. He is the most hypocritical person in the world, and he is also the most self-conscious person in the world. This sword is returned for Uncle Fugui. Subai pierced Su Yuhang's chest. Su Yuhang's body trembled. He never gave up resistance, but at this time, compared with his son, it is true that the father is old and the son is in his prime. You can't beat him at all. The following is for my brother. He is still underground waiting to be reunited with your family. Subai held Su Yuhang's head with both hands and pressed it down hard. Then he lifted his knees. He attacked directly. Snapped. Su Yuhang's face sunken. At this moment, even if he wanted to continue laughing, he couldn't show it. In fact, right now, there is still one person who can save him, and that is his wife. But obviously, at this time, Lu Menjiao chose to watch the fire from the other side. Or, she couldn't help it, because there was a strange energy fluctuation in the train, as if the source of the disaster broke out there. Even the boss was a little afraid of that level of curse and disaster concentration. Subai let go of his hand. Su Yuhang sat down unsteadily. The whole body is covered with blood. There is also a big hole. The body is broken. The soul languishes. Subai took a deep breath. This was the scene he had dreamed of. This is also the moment that I have been waiting for a long time. Perhaps his son knew how powerful his father's desire for revenge was. That's why the little guy chose to die with his father, and let his father give it to him. This is the person who understands you best, and the person who understands you best, not those relatives and friends who blindly would rather tear down a temple than a marriage, who seem to care about you and are pretentious for your own good. You are really not like me, Su Yuhang said. How could I have a stupid son like you? Uncle Fugui's is returned, my brother's is returned, and I still have mine. Subai raised the sword again and kicked Su Yuhang over. Then he stabbed Su Yuhang directly in the crotch. Puff. Faced with this humiliation, Su Yuhang still maintained his calmness, as if he was not the one who was being abused and humiliated. How can a person like you have a child? Subai asked. What about you? Su Yuhang asked. He seemed to be unable to feel the physical pain. Your revenge today was obtained at the expense of your son's future. What reason do you have to accuse me? We are the same as you. It's just that you can pretend better than me, and you are better than me at pretending. Subai slowly squatted down. Let your face be close to Su Yuhang. Actually, you know, if you had told me from the beginning that my father wanted to be a broadcaster, so he needed to sacrifice his son to help, it is possible that everything today would not be like this. Subai stretched out his hand and pressed it on Su Yuhang's chest. But you didn't. From the beginning to now, you have always treated me as a tool that can be destroyed after use. The aura of disaster in the train was constantly expanding and spreading, and a big hole appeared in the sky, like a man with an abscess that was festering. Below, the lucky audience members looked at Subai's domestic violence over there and at the two women's fight above. Their brains. Somewhat confusing. It was originally a broadcast of conquests and battles against another world. It is a crucial battle that determines whether the Great Qin Empire can be reborn. It is a war that these big guys can survive. The final direction. It was the son who beat his father. The daughter tears her mother. It's like what was originally a magnificent historical war drama turned into a family ethics drama, and the plot is so confusing that people can't understand what the plot is. It's just that as soon as the beating over there was finished, the beating over here started again. After the beating over there, the beating started again with different methods. Hit, hit, hit. The Qin army was defeated, Su Fu died, and I waited for these big audience members to be left with this small group. But they were still fighting, and he started fighting again. And people like myself. Then he was completely reduced to a role player off the stage responsible for giggling along with the rhythm. Fatty's soul was very weak, but he was still observing the battle in these two directions. At the same time he sighed. It's chaos, chaos, everything is in chaos, and the whole northwestern Shaanxi is reduced to a pot of porridge. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyaolong. Chapter 1106. I don't know what you are obsessed with. Lu Menjiao looked at the lychee in front of him. I don't think I owe you much. If I am Xiaobai, logically speaking, I admit that I owe you, but to you, I really don't have one. Your father is an addict, and your mother has left the family a long time ago. If I had not taken you away, you would probably have become a street girl in Guangzhou in the end, or, with better luck, you could be an income earner. Nice perimeter. Haha, even if you enter the broadcast, you still have such a powerful power and sit on top of all living beings. It can't be said to be a favor, but you are absolutely not indebted. Moreover, I don't believe you haven't really investigated your life experience. I'm even a little lucky for your biological father. He has died long ago. Otherwise, when his daughter comes back, what awaits him will be a life worse than death. At this time, it's no longer interesting to say these words. There is a black circle behind lychee, and from the circle, black liquid is constantly leaking out. As soon as these liquids appear, they evaporate out, like layers. Like paint, it directly soaked into this space. I never noticed it before, but now it's obvious. Compared with Su Yuhang, you are really far behind. This scene. If Subai were here, he would feel very familiar. Of course, Subai is not far from here now, but he is busy beating his father and doesn't have time to come over yet. In the story world of Zhao's villa, Subai also suffered from the same situation, but this time the carrier of the poison was changed from himself to lychee. For more than 20 years, Su Yuhang has made a lot of preparations and experiments in order to complete the handover of broadcast consciousness. Subai is a successful product, while lychee is a semi-finished product, but it seems that he really dug it himself before. There are too many pitfalls, and the result is that you will be pitted in the opposite direction. Maybe, Su Yuhang himself didn't expect this situation. Of course, now it's not a matter of whether Su Yuhang thinks about it or not. His original vow that everything was under control has turned into a joke at this time. He came out of the broadcast consciousness and killed everyone, deliberately leaving lychee and Subai unsolved. His purpose was nothing more than to threaten his wife to prevent Lu Menjiao from opening the door for him when he wanted to go back. Dominate this highest level of life. But now, with the little guy's sudden anger and desperation, the situation has taken a turn for the worse. Su Yuhang's 20 years of gains and losses were completely suppressed by Subai and he was beaten wildly. Although the lychees on Lu Menjiao's side were semi-finished products, the broadcast consciousness, which was originally composed of two people, after Su Yuhang left, Lu Menjiao himself felt a little helpless, half a caddy to 8 ounces, just enough. There are very few pure people in this world. People like to use the word pure to describe a person, often because they feel that the word Shabai is not convenient to say. Even though Subai was full of anger, he still had to bear so much for Monk Fo and the fatty. He even had to face the Qin army's war with them even at the expense of slowing down his own revenge. When it comes to lychee, revenge seems to be more of a slogan and a kind of self-hypnosis. I'm miserable, so I need revenge, I need debt collection. Therefore, in order to take revenge, I can drag everyone else in the orphanage into the broadcast. In order to take revenge, I can turn Hai Mai Mei, who loves me wholeheartedly, into my substitute, and then discard her after use. Revenge is a brand, and what is hidden under the brand is one's own ambition and greed. Just as Chen Ru's goal has been Li Qi for a long time, Li Qi's goal has always been Su Yuhang and Lu Menjiao. Why can you become a broadcaster, integrate into the broadcast, and enjoy the pleasure of existence of this higher life, while I can only be reduced to a stepping stone for you to ascend to the throne in the past? Because of imbalance and jealousy, Li Qi is driven step by step to where he is today. Just as ordinary people look at aristocrats and think that every one of the imperial family is unattainable, mysterious, and complicated. In fact, the imperial family is just like all other living beings. They will also be jealous, brothers will fight for inheritance, and families will be divided. There are also disagreements with each other. Lu Menjiao was a little tired. She had always been a very plain person. She was an audience, but she was a more indifferent audience. Therefore, she could borrow her sister's body and let her sister return to bed and turn into a corpse. You can also accompany Su Yuhang to use his two sons as test subjects. She knew that Su Yuhang expressed his loyalty and admiration to her time and time again. In fact, even Su Yuhang himself might not be able to tell how much he was sincere. We were all fallen people and we all knew that the other party had no bottom line. People, that's why we can come together. If we know each other's basics, there won't be too many illusions. If Su Yuhang didn't touch Su Bai because the little guy didn't allow it, then when Su Yuhang killed Su Fu when he just killed the Qin army, he could have easily killed Li Ji. He didn't do it for a simple reason. He was afraid that he would not open the door. He has been scheming against himself, always wary of himself. Even if they are pillow lovers, their consciousnesses have been integrated into the broadcast together, and their relationship is closer than any other couple in the world. Ridiculous. It is precisely because of Su Yuhang's selfishness. It is precisely because of Su Yuhang's calculation that when this baby, his nominal grandson, suddenly fell into despair. The situation was originally so bright that the clouds opened and the moon shone brightly. It fell apart instantly. And what's even more ridiculous is that Lu Menjiao couldn't say that Su Yuhang did something wrong. Because when Su Yuhang took the initiative to leave consciousness and return to his identity as a listener to clear the obstacles for broadcasting, that kind of person, the only feeling of self-exclusive broadcast consciousness, Lu Menjiao fell into a deep intoxication that she couldn't help herself from. To this end, she is willing to take risks. It was impossible for her to take the initiative to open the door again and let Su Yuhang return to the broadcasting consciousness. So, the current situation. In fact, the couple did it together. Originally, neither Su Bai nor Li Ji had a chance. Even in the previous plans and deductions, Su Bai and Li Ji were not threats at all. The real threat was Su Fu and the Qin army. Su Yuhang recovered his 20 years. Even he himself was a little unfamiliar and couldn't believe that he could bring about such a huge change in these 20 years. However, everything became a joke. Husband and wife are birds of the same forest. When disaster strikes, it is difficult to fly. The poison in Li Qi's is fading away. She was looking towards Su Bai. She can't hold on much longer. And Lu Menjiao's body is constantly switching from virtual to real, and from real to virtual. Obviously, she is being forced out of the broadcast consciousness by this terrible toxin. Once she's out, then broadcast consciousness will no longer exist. Or form a new consciousness that has no emotions and no thinking and is completely driven by rules and instincts. Su Bai's anger has almost been vented. To be precise, the interest has almost been collected. When you hate someone so much that the meaning of continuing to live is mostly just for revenge. In the end, when your enemy really fall in front of you, after you felt. Instead, there is a sense of hesitation and emptiness. Su Bai originally thought that he would not have such a ridiculous emotion, but the fact was that it still appeared. Su Yuhang had been beaten into a human shape and was lying on the ground. His soul was about to collapse and his body was basically damaged, but Subai still had one breath left in him. Subai was reluctant to kill him. It seemed too cheap for him to let him die simply like this. If possible, Subai was even willing to seal Su Yuhang with him. One day when I am unhappy, I will beat up Su Yuhang. If I am happy one day, I have to beat Su Yuhang to cheer me up. One day when I have nothing to do, I can beat Su Yuhang. However, for Su Yuhang, he seemed to have the consciousness of the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. He did not burst into tears, nor did he kneel down to beg for mercy. Perhaps, this was his way of maintaining the last bit of his ridiculous dignity. At first, you invited Lao Fuegui to do this with you, but Lao Fuegui refused, so you regarded him as your threat. Subai sat down next to him. He knew that lychee was detonating in the train at this time. He poisoned himself, but Subai was not in a hurry to get involved. On your own side, do one thing at a time. Anyway, today, no one of this couple will be left behind. Su Yuhang didn't answer. Maybe Fuegui has seen today's scene a long time ago. Subai smiled. Mr. Zhao also saw it, so he gave way, and Fuegui also saw it, so he didn't choose to join you. Only you, Su Yuhang, think you are smart enough to do all this. Look at all this. It's all what you want. Subai stretched out his hand and pointed around. The battlefield was littered with corpses and a mess, but what Subai was pointing at was not this so-called battlefield. Subai was neither a thinker nor a moralist. In fact, no matter how brave and majestic the Qin soldiers who died here were, for him, there was no emotion at all. And the big boss of the audience who died in the battle here has nothing to do with Subai. Although everyone is an audience, they definitely don't feel the sadness of a rabbit dying and a fox dying. What Subai was talking about was the past 20 years. It was originally a home that could be in good health. It has become a situation like this. You're pitying me. Su Yuhang suddenly spoke at this time. He could face failure and admit failure, but the pity from Subai made him unable to accept it. Deep in his heart, he still had that kind of arrogance. Xiao, this kind of arrogance is reflected in his previous behavior. Snapped. Subai slapped Su Yuhang into the pit. Blow out a smoke ring. Don't interrupt my emotions. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disiao. Chapter 1107. The size of the scenery you see depends on the height you stand. But the higher you stand, the less realistic everything becomes. Subai felt this way at this moment. The melody of revenge, from the vigorous and vigorous at the beginning, to the desolate and desolate tone now, when Su Yuhang is beside him, he can slap him into the mud with a slap. Always felt somewhat lost. It's like a game. After you overthrow the last big boss, it suddenly feels boring. But Subai had no other choice. He had always lived in the shadow of Su Yuhang. He could either sink completely, give up on himself, and become a puppet on a string who sacrificed himself to achieve his parents' success, or he could climb up all the way like he is now. Then find an opportunity to strike out. It's not that Subai didn't want to make other choices, but that Su Yuhang never gave one. Of course, it makes no sense to think about this now. When things have reached this point, they should finally come to an end. Every time Zhu Beiji said he wanted to break up, he had to mention that the property should be divided first. Let's all settle the accounts clearly. Just let it be. Subai put his hand on Su Yuhang's chest. Su Yuhang closed his eyes. He knew that his son was ready to kill him. This made him somewhat relieved. Of course, he also knew that Subai didn't have much time to burn himself. When the broadcast collapsed and ended completely, many things would also be annihilated. For example, the audience's destiny. Of course, there is also the grandson who is willing to kill himself even if he is willing to bury himself. Because the little guy is a product of the broadcast in the story world, his existence is basically the broadcast. Once the broadcast collapses, the little guy will cease to exist. There is no winner. This competition between father and son. To the end. All that's left is a mess. Boom. Subai exerted force in his palms. The majestic power is released. The dying Su Yuhang's body collapsed and his soul died at this moment. He completely left this world without leaving any trace. In the distance, Chen Ryu closed her eyes slightly. She still had some relationship with Su Yuhang, but she did not expect that this man would end up like this. Of course, she had nothing to lament. Her life was already not much left. Her only regret may be that she did not actually win this war. The transcendence and high-spiritedness she wanted did not really appear. Everyone. The monk put his hands together and recited Amitabha. It's not salvation or prayer, it's just feeling grateful that all of this has finally come to an end. As Sudbai's friend, the monk witnessed how difficult Sudbai's journey was. In his opinion, although the current ending was far from perfect, at least it was an explanation. Buddha got up staggeringly. He reached out and took the shield of a dead Qin soldier next to him to support his body. Monk, we are almost done. The ending is confusing, the twists and turns are confusing, the present is confusing. Everything is confusing, and it seems that no one has really understood it. Su Yuhang, who has been integrated with broadcasting, is like this, Subai is like this, and everyone else present is naturally like this. Dad, I will send it to you first, and then Mom. Subai said this to Erbai. He knew that his brother had been waiting below for too long. They were originally brothers who turned against each other. In the end, the two of them realized that in fact, Subai had relied on Erbai to survive several opportunities and dangers. The two brothers were actually very similar. They would do anything for revenge. It's just that Erbai's life was too short. He passed his childhood, but after that, he was always in a bronze box, so he was very innocent, he loved innocently, and he hated innocently. In fact, he is more like Subai than himself. He has experienced so much and has so many bonds, and he is no longer the same person as before. After getting up, Subai walked towards the train. He could see the little guy greeting him through the train window. The little guy didn't care about what was happening in the train. He only knew that his father should be very happy now. That's enough. Subai's figure appeared in the train. He didn't even pay attention to Li Ji and Lu Menjiao, who were fighting with each other. He just sat down on his seat, unsealed Ji Xiang Ruyi, and then held the little guy in his arms. Middle. After all, the toxin in lychee is a semi-finished product. Although it has been stimulated at this time, it has begun to weaken. But even so, Lu Menjiao is about to break away from the broadcasting consciousness. Su Yuhang is dead. The father is dead. But the mother and daughter were not sad at all. Instead, they fought harder for the family property. Subai felt a little sad for Su Yuhang. Fugui died 20 years ago. There is also Ruyi accompanying him. Su Yuhang's body is still cold, but no one cares about him anymore. You said you have been working so hard and calculating for most of your life, what are you trying to do? As soon as he thought about this, a smile appeared on the corner of Subai's mouth. Turning back and looking out the car window, Subai saw that the remaining audience members were still there, not moving. They were very powerful, they were all big guys, but they were also lost lambs. They didn't know where their own path was, so they could only waiting there passively for the final verdict. Lychee didn't call Subai, and it was even less likely that Lu Menjiao would. Perhaps, they hoped that Subai would continue to sit on the sidelines and wait until there was an outcome between the two women. It no longer mattered what happened to Subai. but Subai found that the little guy's body was slowly getting weaker. This not only ruined the future, but also caused the little guy to lose his identity as a soul boy and the possibility of growing up. But at the moment, the little guy's body and a sign of the impending disintegration of the soul. When he was most hesitant and difficult to make a decision, it was his son who helped him make the decision. For this, he did not hesitate to sacrifice everything. To be honest, Subai felt that he owed no one as much as he owed the little guy. In the story world of Mr. Zombie, if the little guy hadn't actively crawled to the demon's lair, he would have been dead long ago. Don't worry, Dad won't let you die, let alone leave you alone. Subai stood up with the little guy in his arms, and then took the initiative to walk into the whirlpool. Both women looked at him, because Subai's choice may determine the final result, because Subai is a special enlightenment, comparable to the old rich and powerful back then. He is like a sharp knife that can kill people. Subai stared at Lu Menjiao. In fact, her mother had always been very low-key. She seemed to like standing behind Su Yuhang and watching Su Yuhang go about his business. If I hadn't witnessed with my own eyes the scene of my aunt lying on the bed and her body rotting, Subai probably didn't bother to do anything to Lu Menjiao after killing Su Yuhang. But, who told you to do something unnecessary in the first place? Subai stretched out his hand and pointed at Lu Menjiao. Wow! Next moment, a crack appeared on Subai's body, and a crack also appeared on Lu Menjiao's eyebrows. But Lu Menjiao still didn't let go, she couldn't let go. Subai is like a knife. If you want to hurt others, you will be hurt yourself. At this time, 3 cracks appeared again on Subai's body. Lu Menjiao's body trembled, and her whole body turned from virtual to real, and completely turned to real, which was equivalent to being forcibly pushed out of the center of the broadcasting consciousness by Subai. Like Su Yuhang before her, Lu Menjiao became a listener and returned to her original identity. Lu Menjiao looked at all this with some disbelief. It seems as if the past 20 years before me were nothing more than a dream in spring and autumn. Subai once met the woman who was her surrogate mother. That woman had always imagined that her son from a wealthy family would come back to pick up her favorite food. The current Lu Menjiao. So similar to that woman. Even if you are a boss. Even if your level of life was once so high that all living things looked up to you. But essentially, what's the difference between you and that woman who can do surrogacy for money? It's just that everyone sells different things. Subai walked up to Lu Menjiao. Lu Menjiao raised her head and looked at Subai. Her body is slowly dying. This is not Subai's handiwork. It was Lu Menjiao's own choice. She witnessed how Su Yuhang died in Subai's hands to vent his anger, and she didn't want to do it again. In fact, Subai was too lazy to do it again, but since she chose the loser's decent ending, Subai didn't do anything else. The result of failure actually caused more profound damage to their bodies and minds than any torture. As for Subai's subsequent torture and venting, it was just an add-on. Subai witnessed Lu Menjiao's disappearance with his own eyes. From the beginning to the end, he did not say a word to her. The scene of mother and son parting did not apply to the two of them. I am willing to share the highest life with you. Lichi closed her eyes and seemed to be trying to integrate into the broadcast consciousness. The magpie's nest is occupied by doves. The anger and jealousy of the past. At this time it finally became a reality. Subai turned around and looked at Lichi. This woman who has been intoxicated with the atmosphere of the highest life. In the past, Subai thought Chen Ryu was stupid. But right now, the same goes for Lichi. Broadcast consciousness is a hot potato and a stage, but it cannot accommodate too many people. The little guy's body is getting weaker and weaker, and is even starting to become transparent. 2 people are already the limit that the broadcasting consciousness can carry. And it is impossible for me to be separated from the little guy. Previously, Subai had also doubted why Lichi and Lu Menjiao would fight to the death, leaving Su Yuhang, and Lu Menjia would only accept Lichi, so she would not lose anything. But soon, Subai discovered the reason. Because Lu Menjia was driven away, Lichi's soul, which was being integrated into the broadcast consciousness, suddenly became distorted. In the end, the soul was separated from the body, but its soul did not disappear and merge into the Great Supreme. Lichi looked in disbelief. How is it possible? How is it possible? Why would it refuse my integration? Why? Lichi is not qualified to integrate. Even if she is excellent, even if she is powerful. But Su Yuhang and Lu Menjia were Mr. Zhao's choices, and they were recognized by Mr. Zhao. Subai followed the footsteps of wealth and was independent of the rules of broadcasting. Lichi. She has nothing.